All righty, good to see you today. Welcome to God's house. Our sermon series, Ageless, Analogiess, is still going on. We're on the 36th part, so we've been the better part of a year involved with this, and there have been other days in which we did different things. We are in Matthew chapter 25. Before we switch to the words, that's Wednesday night. We had a snow cone truck here. I always look forward to Snow Cone Sunday. And we invite not only our church, but also our neighborhood, a lot of folks around here, and that come over, at least walk over for a little while. And one thing I have found out is that snow cone is the same word in English and Spanish. Snow cone, and here everybody's ready to go. So we had a great time, and some of you will remember we were speaking. Some of you remember the days, and I think they still have it in some areas, of the ice cream truck. You know, you get snow cones and various things like that, and kids used to really look forward to it, and it didn't cost $18 like it does today. But Matthew chapter 25, we're going to read verses 1 through 13. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish one said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." When I was a child, we had an 8-track tape, Best of Johnny Cash. And one of those songs on there was The Legend of John Henry. Anybody hear that song? John Henry's pappy woke him up one midnight. That's my imitation. In that song, what he was doing killed him, and that almost killed me. But not as close as it came to killing Darrell, I tell you that. But we're working on it. Little by little. You can actually see through the woods and see the church now as you come down the road. Jesus gave around 40 parables in the Bible. They are ageless analogies that both conceal and reveal truth. We've seen parables regarding people, plants, animals, objects, servants, masters, ideas, and events. And today we're looking at the parable of the 10 virgins. A couple of things, real simple. First of all, 10 virgins were waiting for a wedding. Now, you do read in some versions of the Bible, and some commentators will say, this is talking about the bridesmaids. Okay, kind of makes sense, right? They're waiting on the wedding to occur. Now, here's the thing. Waiting on the wedding? What do you mean waiting on the wedding? Didn't they send out invitation? Didn't they tell people when it was? Didn't they know when it was coming about? Well, in that day and time, they knew a wedding was going to happen, but they didn't know exactly when. Here's what happened. The groom's father would choose a bride for his son, either on his own or he would send someone as a servant or a messenger. And you find that in the Old Testament a couple of times, to go and get a bride. You find a couple of times in the Old Testament where one of the patriarchs said, "Go get a bride for my son." Now, I know that is a far cry from today. Today, parents get a call and the kids say, "We're getting married." You what? What do you mean? Who? Well, that's what happens. Not necessarily going back to this day, but let me put something else in your mind. There was a time in history where the person that someone married was somebody they knew all their life. This meant a couple things. It meant the families knew each other. It meant that there was a backstory. And the marriage was more of a known quantity. Do you understand? You know how it is when you get married. It's like you get married and 2 days later you say, "Who are you? I didn't know you were like that." You didn't, because they hid it from you. They didn't want you to know. If you'd have known it, you wouldn't have married them. So in that day, and in some prior days, even within the last, say, probably 150 years, something like that, people went into marriage more with a known quantity. By the way, just think about it. You may not agree, but your parents might be better at picking a spouse for you than you are. I'm not saying they always are, but let me just ask you this. If you got a girl, wouldn't you like to pick the guy? Wouldn't you? I mean, really? People, when they get a little older, not saying really old, but when they get, I'm up there with you. Don't you look at things differently? Don't you? Your mom would say she can't cook. You say she don't have to cook. But you know what I'm saying? There's a different standard. The dad picked him out, or her out. If the bride's father agreed on the marriage, they would come to terms on payment. I said payment. Fellas, you may not have paid her dad, but you paying. You paying somebody. The groom's father was required to pay a bride price to the bride's father, basically buying her for his son. I remember I read an account one time of a woman who was a single lady, and she had been to the mission field, and she was back and sharing with the church what had happened, and she had said that in the culture they were in, one of the men there wanted to buy her for I think it was 4 cows, and she said, well, it would take 5 cows, and of course they didn't. Of course, that quelled it out. And when she got done telling the story, there was a guy out there who said, "I got 5 cows." So they set it up. All the parties, the families, the primaries, would come together for a betrothal ceremony. Now, or betrothal, however you want to pronounce it. Now, you remember that the Bible says that Mary and Joseph were betrothed, but they had not come together. Okay? At that point, the bride price would be paid And the bride and groom would sign a covenant, a contract, that's called a ketubah. And that signified their agreement to marry. They would drink wine as a symbolic sealing of the marriage. I got a feeling that some marriages come about today because of a lot of wine. But that's how they sealed the thing. Now here's the point. They were betrothed at this time. They had signed a contract. Money had been exchanged, and they were ready to get married. Now, we're familiar with people calling off engagements sometimes, right? Happens sometimes, not a whole lot, but my experience, but it happens sometimes. This was the type of thing you didn't call off without a divorce. If you were betrothed to somebody, it was just like you were married. Now, you were not living together or anything at the time, but you had made a contract and made an agreement, and you were going to go through with it. The only thing other than a divorce would have been a death to nullify this contract. They were basically married, but they hadn't consummated the marriage. Now, one more thing. The decision on the part of the groom's father could also nullify the marriage. Now, you may not remember this. You might have read it in the Old Testament. Do you recall some instances in the Bible when a guy was going to marry a girl and he said, I found out she'd been with somebody else? They nullified it. Okay? Could be broken, but not in general. Now, at this point, the groom would return to his father's house and would work to build an addition onto the house. Have you known folks got married without anywhere to live? I have. But think about that. Think about the cavalier manner in which people enter into marriages now. That wasn't that way in this time. They had to meet each other. They had to shake on the deal. They had to pay money. They had to plan. And this guy was responsible to go and fix her a place to live. This could take up to a year to complete. One day, though, he would get his work, his building, his addition approved by his father, and his father would give him permission to go get his bride. So, the bridegroom would go back for the bride, and you can see they know exactly when it's going to happen. He'd go back for the bride who was waiting for him. Now, I mean, I know from what I said, they didn't know exactly when. I sort of got an idea. He'd got her a message that I'll be there soon. I kind of got an idea. They had a way of going around that, but that's what was happening. But she was waiting, but she didn't know exactly when he's going to get there. Now, you go in the book of Revelation, the Bible says the bridegroom has come and his wife has made herself ready. Now, I know it's different, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but who takes the longest to get ready at your house? I'd have showed up, and she'd have still been getting ready. I'd have been getting ready for the last year. She'd have still been getting ready. You ever say, honey, it's time to go, and she says, all I got to do is put my clothes on. What? That's all I had to do too, and I've been waiting for 45 minutes. So, he would go back and get the bride, and this is where they'd send out a runner or an advanced person into the street, and they would say, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh." He would bring her back to his father's house, and they would enjoy a feast that lasted up to 7 days. Which means it wasn't me, because if it was me, they'd have been out of there. I'm not going to wait for a 7-day feast. But it's a big deal. Now, do you remember Jesus' first miracle was done at the wedding in Cana, right? Remember? Now, it doesn't really exactly say, but doesn't it seem like it was kind of a bigger deal than what we do now? And what we do now is plenty big a deal, but you understand what I mean? Seemed like it was a big event. A lot of people were at, and there was a lot of eating and drinking and things like that going on. Now, until they got married, when they were still in the betrothal episode, the bride was preparing herself all this time. She was doing all the stuff she needed to do. If you've ever been involved in preparing a wedding, it wasn't exactly the same, but you know how long that takes. And everybody knew, now they're not married, but they're betrothed. Everybody knew that she was spoken for. Okay? So these 10 women, bridesmaids, virgins, however you want to put it, they're waiting for the wedding. Now, half of them were wise, 5 of them were wise, and half of them were foolish. If it was today, it'd be 1 of them wise and 9 of them foolish. Half of them were wise. How do you know they were wise? Okay, the wise brought their lamps and brought some extra oil for the lamp. Now, why? Well, they were prepared whatever happened. Now, I know this is dumbing it down a little bit, but you ever been anywhere and after a while you say, "Man, I wish I'd have brought a jacket," or something like that? They were ready. They were ready to wait. See, they were thinking ahead of time, what if this takes longer than we think it will and we have to wait? We'll probably need some extra oil. Now, 5 of them were unwise because they didn't think ahead. They were not prepared for the long term. They'd have been all right if everything had happened according to plan, but you guys know just from living life, I mean, how often does a plan really come off, right? Y'all remember, some of y'all remember, I guess it's back in the 70s probably, most of you weren't alive, but back in the 70s there was a show called The A-Team, had Mr. T on it and others, and at the end of the show, the lead character, he would say, "I love it when a plan comes together." Well, me too, but they don't ever come together. There's always something that's not right. So they didn't think ahead. Well, while they were waiting, because it turns out they did have to wait extra, they all fell asleep. Now, here's the thing. The foolish fell asleep and the wise fell asleep. They all fell asleep because it was a long time. Let me say something about this. Waiting is a common experience for everyone. And it's hard to wait. We are worse about waiting today than we were in years gone by. And I'm not saying people were more patient then, but I'm just saying society was different. I can remember I've gone through a few sites of like the Hermitage and Mount Vernon and a few places like that as you have, and maybe you'll have a tour guide. And one of the things you find out is that some of these fellas, especially back in the 1800s or whatever, they'd leave home one day and they may not be back for 3 years. There was a time before email. What do they call letters now. What do they call them? Snail mail. There was a time before that. There was a time that you turned the TV on and it was black for a minute, and then there appeared a little dot, and then it turned into a line, and then it opened up. And by the time it was on, you had time to make your sandwich and come back. If we have one that doesn't come on immediately, it's going back to Sam's. Something wrong with it, right? We become more impatient. And people don't wait because they don't have to wait. Well, in a time when you had to wait, you learn how to wait. Waiting is a common experience for everyone, and immediacy has spoiled entire generations of people. Nobody can wait for anything. Can you imagine that extensive run up to the wedding? I said, can you imagine that happening today? I tell you what it would do. It would determine whether or not you really want to get married. You remember the story in the Old Testament where the guy said, well, you can marry my daughter, but you're going to have to work for me for 7 years to get her. And he said, I'll do it. The bridegroom, though, eventually did show up. And everybody woke up at that time. And then the foolish bridesmaids found out that their lamps had gone out and they didn't have any extra oil, so they couldn't get them lit again. And the wise simply had to refill theirs because they had extra, but they didn't have enough to lend. Because the foolish said, can't we borrow some of your oil? And they said, we don't have enough for that. Does it occur to you that today there's a whole group of people that spend their time borrowing from other folks that don't prepare for life? I think everybody's had that feeling of being a little out of sorts because you weren't prepared. Did you ever go anywhere and when you got to the place you thought, I didn't know I was supposed to wear a tie or something like that? When I was a youth director, and this was in Virginia 100 years ago, we had a Christian school, and I was the athletic director and the basketball coach and a bunch of different stuff like that. The men of the school teachers and a couple of men for the church were going to play the boys' high school basketball team. So we built it up in the church and all the rest of that. So we got together, and they had away uniforms and home uniforms. And they had taken their home uniforms and the away uniforms, and we all met and we looked at them uniforms and we thought, we can't wear those. So we got together and decided, well, just, wear your sweatpants or whatever, or, something you feel comfortable in, and we'll make the jerseys work out, and, we'll do it that way. Okay. So we all got so one guy wasn't there, and nobody told him. So the night came, and we were all out in the gym, and we were shooting and making layups and whatnot, and all of a sudden the door just flings open, and Alan just presented himself on the landing in a full uniform. It looked like it was painted on. He jumped down the stairs and started striding out to the court. And as he got closer to us, he started slowing down till finally he was walking, and he said to me, I thought we were wearing uniforms. felt rather, rather awkward. You got to prepare. You got to prepare. In life, in some way, we're all going to reach that point where we're not prepared for something. It happens to all of us. The lesson is to get ready. So the wise virgin said, "Go buy you some oil." And so they went to buy oil, and no telling what they had to do. One of the things I really loved about our rental facility over yonder was that we were next door to a Dollar General. And I thought, Lord, what are we going to do when there's not no Dollar General here? But now we are strategically located between two Dollar Generals. So that worked out. And so they got back with their oil. The door was shut. They knocked on the door and they said, "Let us in, let us in, let us in." And the person at the door not only said, "I can't let you in," he said, "I don't know you." And so that takes us to the verse that we all read together, and that is that Jesus said, "Watch for the kingdom." Watch. Watch. 10 virgins are waiting for a wedding. Secondly, we are also waiting for a wedding. Now let's just walk down through it a little bit. The wise bridesmaids, virgins, are saved people. They're symbolic not only of women, they're symbolic of everybody. They are saved people. Now, a couple of things about the wise. They counted the cost of salvation. Now, you know how altar calls, invitations are. I've been in many. Been in some that were very effective and very real. The Spirit of God is very near. But the emphasis is on getting folks to come, right? Jesus said, "Before you follow me, count the cost." I'm not interested in you saying you're going to follow me and then you turning back, so you count the cost first. That is not what we say when trying to get people to come to Christ. We say come to Christ and everything will work out. We don't say count the cost. Jesus also said, if you want to come after me, deny yourself. Take up your cross and follow me. Jesus did not say, follow me and I will give you a better life. Follow me and I will make sure that you have money. Follow me and I'll make sure that you have houses and lands. He didn't say any of that. He said, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Why? Because he's looking for genuine, real, true followers. So the wise had counted the cost as far as making sure they had enough provisions to wait for the bridegroom to come. We have to have today a faith that endures. Endures. One of the things that people struggle with today, and I know they have for all time, but it's true in our time as well, they struggle with staying committed to anything. You know, they'll be as committed to you as they are to all the rest of the stuff. They're not committed to anything. Now, in some areas, you don't have to. In some areas, some people are more committed than other folks would be, and it's not that big a deal. For instance, like some guys will say, I'm a Ford man. you know, or I'm a Chevy man. You know, there's that type of thing. You know, I always buy the same kind of stuff every time, and that is the cheapest, whatever it is. That's what I buy. But you understand what I mean. You know, some people that they're real committed to one particular thing. And for some of those things, it doesn't matter that much. But we're talking about eternity here. And we have to have a faith that endures, because you might have to wait. You might have to wait. You're praying, and Lord, why don't you answer? Why don't you? And you might have to wait. You want Jesus to come back. And it would have been just great if he'd have come back the last day of youth camp. You know, I'd have been great. That ain't how it works. That ain't how it works. When you want Jesus to come back, I've heard people say, I want him to come back on a Sunday, because, okay, I'll be in church, maybe. You know, if he comes back on Sunday. I knew a guy. Listen, do you know when you're going to Nashville, you know when you get to 250, that farm that's on the north side of the road that's real pretty and got the creek running through it? I know the guy who used to own that. That guy died in the pulpit. You know, I can sort of see a preacher saying he would, but boy, that's a way to freak the congregation, isn't it? I don't know where, but here's the thing. When Jesus comes back, you want to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you're supposed to be cutting the grass, you want him to come back. You want to be doing that when he comes back. If you're supposed to be in church, if you're supposed to be at the hospital, no matter what you're supposed to be doing, blessed is the one who the Lord will find so doing when he comes back. Whatever it is that God has for you, you be doing that. And you might have to wait. Jesus said this, you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Jesus said, because times are so bad, people get cold in their hearts. It's not somebody else, it's us, it's you, it's me. We do it. We just cool off. That's a process, a scientific process called entropy, which means when you take something away from the heat source and put it off, it cools down over time. And that happens to us spiritually when we get very far from the heat source. Because things are so bad, most people will flag in their love for God. But the one who stands firm till the end shall be saved. Not the one who said, Jesus, come into my heart, will be saved. The one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Now see, it sounds like that when Jesus was talking about salvation, he was talking about something that meant something to a person, something that brought about in them a life of sacrifice, something that caused them to be willing to lay other things aside for salvation, and something that they were going to stick with. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. When's the end going to come? Don't know. Don't know. But one day, the last message will be given. and God's going to say, it's time. The last person heard in the end. What did Jesus say? He said, no man knows the day or the hour, nor do I know, but my Father knows. Remember what we said a while ago? When the guy went to get his bride, you know when he went? When his dad approved of everything that was done, and his father said, it's time now, then he went to get the bride. And one day, God the Father will say, it's time, and Jesus Christ will come, the bridegroom, to receive the church, his bride. And so the wise bridesmaids are saved people. Now the foolish, of course, are unsaved people. Now what does that mean? They were there waiting. They had some oil. They didn't. Maybe they were false professors. I don't know. There is a lot of that. There's a lot of that. That's common. Many, many people I've prayed with over the years said they accepted Christ. I believed them. Thank you, brother. Welcome to the kingdom. All the rest of that, I don't really know. I told you before, I think I was at the Cove when Billy Graham was in the last days of his life. The Cove's his place in Asheville, North Carolina. His daughter, his oldest daughter, was there, and she was speaking to the group, and she had a part where she did something almost every day. And she said that as her dad was on his deathbed, Billy Graham said to his daughter, he said, do you think that all those people who walked down those aisles over all these years really got saved? We don't really know, do we? Well, their faith didn't endure because they ran out of oil. Now, in Jesus' parable of the sower, he said some plants spring up, but then when persecution comes and things get tough, they die. They fall. Were they really saved, or did they renounce their salvation, or were they never genuine? We don't really know. All we know is that the Bible says you got to make a meaningful commitment to God, and you got to stick with it. That's what the Scripture teaches. Now, here's what they found. They found that when they lost their faith, or ran out of oil, however you want to put it, they couldn't be saved by someone else's pre-planning. Their parents' faith couldn't save them. Their friends' faith couldn't save them. And then when they finally they said, now we believe. We believe now. We believe. We're ready. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross and save yourself, and then we'll believe. Save us, and then we'll believe. And the Lord said, I don't know you. So he's just talking about the end of time. It sure is. At the judgment seat. See, the question is not going to be whether you know God, whether He knows you. Does He know you? Jesus said, I know my sheep. They follow me, and I know them by name. I don't know if you watch the nature shows. I do. It just fascinates me because some of this stuff I'll never see in life. But there will be these some places in the north where these seabirds congregate, and there may be thousands of them, and they go out to sea to get that mother or that father of that chick will come flying back, and out of all the thousands, they know the one that's theirs. And God knows if you're His or not. We are waiting for a wedding too, because one day Christ will come. Many people will be unprepared. And if we are unprepared, there will be no time to get ready. Let's bow our heads, please.